Dave Hester shouted, "YUUUP!" on Storage Wars for 3 seasons before everything fell apart. In 2012, he accused the show of rigging auctions and planting treasures worth thousands. A&E fired him immediately. The lawsuit dragged through courts for 2 years, costing him over $320,000. Then, something shocking happened. He came back and disappeared again, and came back again in 2025. For years, fans believed he was banned forever for exposing the truth. The real reason he vanished had nothing to do with A&E. It was something far more serious that nearly killed him. Dave Hester was born on July 23, 1964, at Camp Pendleton Marine Corps Base near Oceanside, California, in a strict military world wrapped inside a mixed-culture home. His mother was Mexican, his father had German and Irish roots, and from the start, he was living between different backgrounds and firm rules. Life on the base meant order. Marines everywhere. Uniforms, early mornings, clear lines between strength and weakness. The days moved on set schedules, with a constant reminder that discipline and toughness were not optional. While other kids grew up in quiet suburbs, Dave's childhood was shaped by marching drills outside, constant movement, and a sense that you had to be ready to stand your ground. That environment, mixed with his parents' different cultures, slowly built the blunt, confrontational attitude people would later see on Storage Wars. Inside the house, things were just as intense, but in a different way. His father was a Marine who poured his energy into collecting model trains. Not a few trains tucked on a shelf, but thousands of pieces filling their home. Dave would later call his father a hoarder, and it was not a joke. The rooms were lined with tracks, engines, cars, and memorabilia. That mountain of stuff became Dave's first education in value. His father took him to swap meets and small auctions, and Dave watched how people argued, hesitated, and lit up when they thought they had found a bargain. In 1969, when Dave was only 5 years old, he went to his first swap meet with his dad. Over the next 5 years, he helped sell that massive train collection piece by piece. They broke the sets apart, moved them through swap meets and auctions, and in the process made tens of thousands of dollars. While his father loved the trains, Dave fell in love with the money and the game behind it. He studied faces, reactions, and the way a simple pause could raise a price. His father wanted to keep things. Dave wanted to flip them. That difference would quietly define his entire life. As he moved into his teenage years, he did not chase a traditional college path. He chased deals. By the time he was 14 in 1978, he was already running his own small operation. He bought cheap items from local garage sales, swap meets, and even beaches, then resold them where he knew people would pay more. He learned to track what people wanted in different places and what trends made certain items jump in value. At the same time, there were problems at home. Dave has at least one brother, and reports say the two do not get along. That strained relationship hints at early conflict that never really left his life. Growing up in a home filled with tension and a base full of Marines, Dave learned early that you could not rely on harmony. You relied on yourself. That is where the stubborn independence came from, the part of him that later clashed with colleagues, producers, and rival bidders. His work did not stay small for long. At 14, he also began attending local auctions in Southern California with a clearer plan. He focused on machinery and tools that he could buy cheaply and resell to shops on or near the Marine base. For him, this was more than a teenager trying to make pocket cash. It was a business. By the late 1970s, he was making regular auction trips, often alongside his father, and he knew the value of many kinds of equipment by sight. He would buy something for $50, then sell it for hundreds, sometimes even thousands, when demand lined up in his favor. Every transaction sharpened his instincts. While most teenagers were thinking about school dances and part-time jobs, Dave was learning margins, risk, and negotiation. By the time he reached adulthood, he had already built the mindset of an experienced dealer who understood how to turn clutter into income. Living around Marines had left a deep mark on his personality. The routines, the constant pressure to be tough, and the expectation that you never back down all fed into the aggressive persona that later exploded on television. Storage Wars viewers saw a man who was loud, sharp, and quick to confront anyone in his way. That did not appear out of nowhere. At auctions, he carried the same energy he had absorbed as a kid on base. He used intimidation and strategy when he bid, stepping forward, locking eyes, and forcing others to make fast decisions. His shout of "YUUUP" became his signature signal that he was in. But it was more than a funny sound. It showed his confidence. It told everyone in that crowd that he was not afraid to push the price up if he smelled profit. Years of reading people in swap meets, auctions, and small resale deals had trained him to notice tiny shifts in body language and emotion. He could sense when someone was bluffing, when someone was desperate, and when a unit was being salted with planted items to fake higher value. Step by step, his role in the auction world shifted from a hungry buyer to a central figure. By the early 1990s, he was working as a bid catcher. That meant he stood in the crowd beside the auctioneer, scanning the room, catching signals, and keeping the rhythm of the bidding alive. It put him right in the center of the action. In 1992, he took a major step and became a state-licensed auctioneer. That license gave him credibility and opened doors to more serious work. He no longer had to stay on the edge, waiting for others to run the show. He could lead auctions himself and take part in estate sales, business liquidations, government seizures, and more. By the mid-1990s, he had become a regular presence at major auctions across Southern California. His loud style, quick reads, and sharp eye for value built a network that stretched through different corners of the industry and set him up for future television fame. At the same time, he was moving beyond simple storage units. He wanted reach. He wanted control. He pushed into estate sales, business liquidations, and government seizures, dealing with items that ranged from everyday furniture to rare and expensive collectibles. All of this experience came together in 2003 when he opened Newport Consignment Gallery and a thrift store called Rags to Riches in Costa Mesa, California. The address was 1941 Newport Boulevard, a strong spot with freeway frontage that pulled in steady traffic. Inside, he had a 10,000-square-foot showroom, a huge space for someone who had once flipped toys and tools out of small stalls. The stores became a meeting point for two sides of his world. There were storage unit finds packed with odd treasures, and there were high-end consignment pieces like art, furniture, and rare collectibles. By 2010, Newport Consignment Gallery had a reputation in the area for its wild mix of inventory and for the presence of Dave himself, who reality television fans now recognized. The success of the stores rested on more than his name. It rested on the team he built. At the height of the business, he had around 15 staff members, including buyers, appraisers, and salespeople. He did not just hire people and leave them alone. He trained them. He taught them how to evaluate items, how to move pieces quickly, and how to think like resellers instead of casual collectors. The shops became engines for his auction work. He could buy in bulk, move the best items to the showroom, and send lower-tier goods into cheaper channels. This system meant his risk at auctions dropped because he had reliable retail space and customer flow behind him. While many bidders had to think carefully before going high on a unit, Dave knew he could outbid them and still find a way to turn a profit through his own outlets. That ability gave him heavy leverage. It turned him into the big fish people whispered about, the one other buyers called the mogul. Of course, that level of power came with a cost. Other bidders often resented him. They believed he had an advantage that they could not match. Years of grind had given him deep knowledge of market value, and he could see through tricks and hype. He knew when a unit contained genuinely valuable items, and when something had been salted with flashy junk to push prices up. On Storage Wars, this played out in real time. He would challenge prices, call out nonsense, and push bids higher with his knowledge and confidence. That created tension. Some rival buyers felt he ruined their chances. Some accused the show of being tilted in his favor. Public confrontations, harsh words, and long-running grudges followed. Yet the same traits that created conflict also built his image as a serious, shrewd competitor who understood the business better than most. While the cameras rolled and his stores buzzed with customers, the industry around him kept changing. Online sales were growing, television demanded more of his time, and the old model of running huge consignment showrooms was becoming harder to manage. In June 2011, he made a major decision. He shut down Newport Consignment Gallery and Rags to Riches. It looked risky from the outside. Why close a 10,000 square foot operation that had made him so well known? But for Dave, it was a pivot. Instead of tying himself to retail space, staff schedules, and daily walk-in traffic, he focused on running his own auction house, Dave Hester Auctions. With that shift, he was no longer only the guy who bought from auctions and sold in a store. He became the one organizing appraisals, handling liquidations, and running consignment events for estates, businesses, and other clients. It allowed him to control more parts of the process, expand his reach, and strengthen his position as a leader in the Southern California auction world without the overhead of big retail floors. At the same time, he understood that television had given him something else besides units and payouts. It had given him a brand. The loud "YUUUP" shout that echoed through storage yards was not just a habit anymore, it was a business asset. In 2011, he applied for trademark protection for the phrase and started selling merchandise that carried it. T-shirts, hats, bumper stickers, all built around one word that people now linked directly to his face and voice. That move showed the calculating side behind the rough exterior. He was not just shouting for attention. He was building a way to earn from that attention. The trademark sparked a legal fight with R&B singer Trey Songz, who claimed the phrase as his own. The dispute pulled his auction world into the world of music and intellectual property law, but it also highlighted something important. Dave Hester had taken a sound used on concrete auction lots and turned it into something that could be printed, sold, and defended in court. It was one more example of how a kid raised among trains, Marines, and swap meets learned to turn almost anything, even a single word, into value. When Storage Wars first hit A&E in 2010, the idea seemed simple. Cameras followed a small group of buyers in California who had just 5 minutes to peek into delinquent storage units before deciding how high they were willing to bid. Whatever they found inside, they tried to flip for profit. The format was easy to understand, but the real hook was the people. Among Daryl Sheets, Barry Weiss, Jared Schultz, and Brandy Passanti, one bidder quickly pulled all the attention toward himself. That was Dave Hester. Off camera, Hester already ran auction and resale businesses, which is why people in his world called him the mogul. On camera, he turned that reputation into a character. He pushed hard in bidding, stared people down, and barked out his loud "YUUUP" whenever he claimed a unit. That shout became his trademark. It also made him the villain of the show in many viewers' eyes. He argued, cut people off, and clashed often with Daryl and Brandon Sheets. A&E leaned into that image. They used his confrontational behavior in promos, trailers, and social media clips because they knew his presence stirred up reactions. Some audiences admired him for his discipline and sharp eye for value. Others saw him as cold and manipulative. Either way, he became impossible to ignore, and that attention set the stage for everything that came later. Hester's on-screen reputation was not just talk. It was fueled by a string of big wins that looked almost unreal. In one Season 2 episode, he paid serious money for a unit that looked boring at first glance. A few old boxes, some metal, nothing that screamed jackpot. Once the door fully opened and he started digging, the picture changed. Hidden inside were several vintage vending machines, many still in working condition. After getting them appraised, he learned the entire haul was worth around $27,000. That single score made him look like a genius who could see value where others only saw junk. Another famous moment came from a locker stuffed with old newspapers and magazines. Most people would walk away from stacks of paper. Hester did not. After going through the dates, he realized every single periodical was from August 16, 1977. That was the day Elvis Presley died. Collectors treated that date like treasure. The collection eventually sold for around $90,000. Headlines picked up the story, and his image as the guy who could turn trash into gold grew even bigger. Those victories made for great television. They also raised a quiet question in the background. Were these finds really natural, or did someone help make them happen? That question exploded into public view when Hester turned from star to accuser. The same big wins that built his legend became part of his case against the show. In 2012, he filed a lawsuit against A&E and Original Productions, claiming Storage Wars was not as real as it looked. He said producers routinely salted storage units, placing valuable items inside to create dramatic reveals. According to his claim, things like Elvis memorabilia and even a BMW Mini were planted so that the auctions would deliver shocks and viral moments. He also said some cast members were helped financially so they could bid on units they could never afford on their own, making the competition feel fair on camera while being anything but behind the scenes. In his view, this was not just creative editing, it was rigging. Hester pointed directly at some of the units that had made him famous. He argued that the Elvis newspaper locker was not a random miracle. He said producers worked with facility owners and outside vendors to fill certain lockers with impressive items. He claimed he paid just $750 for that Elvis newspaper unit and that its later valuation at over $90,000 was no accident. The idea was simple. If the producers controlled what was inside, they could guarantee big reactions. His lawsuit described this not as a one-time trick, but as a regular system used to keep viewers hooked on the idea of hidden treasure. His accusations did not stop with the units themselves. Hester also said that appraisals and interviews, which were presented as spontaneous, were often arranged in advance. According to his complaint, appraisals were sometimes scheduled weeks before filming, and scenes were shot out of order to make discoveries look surprising. He claimed that sometimes the production crew filmed bidding sequences even when real auctions were not taking place, so that they could shape cleaner storylines. In his version of events, viewers at home were often watching people pretend to bid on units or act out reactions long after the actual auction. He said interviews were guided and sometimes fully scripted, with producers feeding lines that fit the narrative they wanted. Whole scenes, he argued, were built for the camera first and for reality second. One of his most damaging claims involved money behind the scenes. Hester said that undercapitalized cast members, who could not normally keep up with big bids, were quietly given cash or other support so they could participate and stay on the show. This helped producers keep certain characters involved for ongoing story arcs. He claimed internal invoices and reimbursements existed that showed vendors being paid to supply planted items, and that emails and checks proved some cast members were reimbursed for items they supposedly discovered on camera. If true, that meant some of the wildest moments on Storage Wars were less discovery and more stagecraft. In December 2012, just after Season 3 ended, Hester turned his complaints into a full legal attack. He accused A&E and Original Productions of staging lockers, rigging auctions, and breaking the trust of viewers. He did not just call it unethical, he argued it could be illegal under the Communications Act of 1934, a law that forbids broadcasters from rigging contests to deceive the public. He said that once he raised these concerns inside the production, the answer was not reform, but retaliation. According to him, he was fired before Season 4 for refusing to play along. His lawsuit sought damages in the high six figures and included both wrongful termination and unfair business practice claims. If everything he alleged had been proven, the fallout could have gone beyond one series and shaken the entire auction reality genre. A&E responded quickly and publicly. The network insisted Storage Wars did not stage lockers and that all items shown on the program were the original contents left by delinquent renters. They leaned on the First Amendment as their shield, arguing that the show was entertainment and protected as creative expression. In court, their lawyers said the Communications Act did not apply to a program like Storage Wars because it was not a traditional contest show, but a form of unscripted storytelling. They framed Hester's claims as an attack on their right to craft narratives from real events. In March 2013, Judge Michael Johnson issued a ruling that changed the shape of the case. He dismissed Hester's unfair business practices claim, agreeing that the way Storage Wars presented its content was protected by the First Amendment. In the judge's view, the producer's decisions about what to show and how to show it were creative choices, even if they involved salting lockers or shaping stories. That meant Hester could not use unfair business practice laws to go after the show's authenticity. It was a major loss for him. The court essentially said that reality television could blur truth and performance and still be shielded as entertainment. The courtroom blows kept coming. In July 2013, after the court rejected Hester's anti-SLAPP motion, he was ordered to pay more than $122,000 in legal fees to A&E and Original Productions. The breakdown was about $96,135 to A&E and $25,957 to the production company. That ruling made him look not just defeated, but financially exposed. Trade outlets and entertainment news covered the numbers in detail, and from the outside, it seemed like he had badly misjudged his legal strategy. Yet the story did not end there. Later in 2013, the judge drew a clear line between creative freedom and employment rights. While unfair business practice and rigging claims were blocked, the court allowed Hester's wrongful termination claim to move forward. The judge ruled that employment disputes are not automatically covered by the First Amendment, even when they happen on a television show. Hester's allegation that he was fired for complaining about rigged practices was, in the court's eyes, an employment issue, not a free speech question. That decision gave him a small but important victory. It meant a jury could eventually decide whether A&E had wrongfully pushed him out. By mid-2014, the fight ended not with a dramatic verdict, but with a quiet settlement. Both sides agreed to resolve the case, and the terms were kept confidential. No one revealed how much money, if any, changed hands, or what deals were made behind closed doors. Neither Hester nor A&E released full statements, and news reports could only confirm that the case had been settled and closed. The secrecy fueled guesses among fans. Some believed he had been paid to walk away. Others thought he got very little. What was clear is that the legal war was over. The aftermath for Hester was mixed. On paper, A&E had scored major wins in court, including the dismissal of the unfair business practice claim and the order for him to pay legal fees. At the same time, Hester still walked away with a confidential settlement and had forced the network to defend its methods in public. Reports suggested that between lawsuit costs, medical bills, and the stress on his businesses, he had racked up over $320,000 in combined financial hits. Some of his ventures, including his Newport consignment gallery, eventually closed. Even so, his case left a mark on the industry. It exposed how thin the line can be between reality and storytelling in unscripted TV and raised new questions about where ethics end and entertainment begins. After the settlement, the story shifted again. Hester did what almost no one expected. In August 2014, he returned to Storage Wars for Season 5. His comeback shocked fans and cast members because many people assumed the lawsuit had burned every bridge. Instead, he walked back onto the lot, shouted "YUUUP" again, and went right back into bidding wars. Reports suggested his return was tied to the settlement, though no contract details were made public. For the producers, bringing him back was a clever move. The very man who had accused the show of fakery became a source of new ratings. Viewers tuned in to see if he would stir up more trouble or fall back into his old role. His presence reignited old tensions. Daryl Sheets, Brandon Sheets, and other buyers were not just acting when they looked uncomfortable around him. They remembered the lawsuit, the accusations of rigging, and the claims that their world had been staged. Some cast members openly criticized him for taking the show to court. Others privately respected him for having the courage to call out what he saw as dishonesty. Every auction turned into more than a hunt for profit. It became a clash of egos and unfinished business. His YUUUP now carried all the weight of his past choices. During his second run on the show, from around Season 5 through Season 12, Hester tried to blend television fame with real business. He ran Dave Hester auctions and used his notoriety to attract clients. The exposure from Storage Wars kept his name in front of both casual fans and serious buyers. Even when his Newport consignment gallery closed in 2019, he stayed active as an auctioneer and appraiser, picking up contracts and consulting jobs. In many ways, he turned his controversial TV persona into a marketing tool. The very drama that made him polarizing on screen helped him in the real auction world. Public opinion never settled on one clean label for him. Some fans saw him as a whistleblower who had told the truth about reality TV and then returned to work anyway. Others saw him as a villain who sued the show that made him famous and then cashed in again when it suited him. The producers understood this split and used it. They leaned into his complicated image to keep conversations going online and to fuel storylines. Hester's journey became a case study in how reality TV can turn someone into both hero and villain at the same time, depending on who is watching. Then, in late 2018, everything changed again. And this time, it had nothing to do with lawsuits or ratings. One night, Hester woke up struggling to breathe. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors discovered he was suffering from a hemorrhagic stroke brought on by untreated sleep apnea and high blood pressure. Tests showed his breathing had been stopping more than 100 times an hour while he slept, starving his brain of oxygen until a blood vessel finally burst. He spent several days in the intensive care unit and then a month in a rehabilitation center. There, he had to relearn basic tasks like walking, showering, and handling daily routines. By September 2019, he was still not fully recovered. The stroke forced him off the auction circuit and away from filming. His disappearance from Storage Wars during the early 2020s was not a strategic break or a hidden clash with producers. It was a medical emergency. While fans traded rumors about secret bans and behind-the-scenes feuds, Hester was quietly trying to rebuild his life. He focused on running parts of his auction business from home, took his doctors seriously for the first time, and tried to repair the damage from years of ignoring his health. The stroke left him with lasting nervous system issues, though no major motor disability. He spoke about how stress, long hours, and stubbornness had led him to push off medical advice until it was nearly too late. Even during his recovery, stories online twisted his absence into something more dramatic. Clickbait headlines claimed he had been permanently banned for exposing the truth about storage wars. Videos and articles repeated the idea that he had been punished for his lawsuit and would never be allowed back. Those stories skipped over the reality. Yes, he had been fired in 2012 after challenging the show's authenticity. And yes, he had spent years battling A&E in court. But the reason he vanished in the 2020s was simple. He was recovering from a life-threatening stroke. The myth of a lifetime ban was louder and easier to sell than the quieter truth of rehab, health struggles, and rebuilding. All of that made his next return even more dramatic. On June 26, 2025, at 61 years old, Dave Hester came back again for Season 16 of Storage Wars. TMZ and other outlets confirmed his reappearance, turning it into a headline before the episodes even aired. Viewers who thought they had seen his last YUUUP suddenly watched him walk back into the auction yard. He looked older and more reflective, carrying not only years of legal battles, but also the visible weight of a near-death health crisis. Even so, when it came time to bid, his competitive edge was still there. The cast's reaction was a mix of shock and caution. Renee Nizoda, Ivy Calvin, Brandy Passante, and others had built a new rhythm during his absence. Now they had to adjust to the return of someone who had sued the show, accused it of staging auctions, and then survived a major stroke. Old rivalries did not simply disappear. The lawsuit years had left scars, and the earlier legal battle over alleged rigging and fraud still hung over him. As Season 16 unfolded, viewers could feel the tension. Every bidding war carried not only the usual financial stakes, but also the history of what these people had gone through together and against each other. Underneath the drama, Hester's 2025 comeback said something bigger about his story. He had started as the loud villain with the golden touch. He became the whistleblower who tried to pull the curtain back on reality TV. He paid a price in court, in his bank account, and in his health. Yet by pushing his way back onto the show again, he turned his own life into another kind of narrative.